Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Harkleroad-Adams Sports Channel here on YouTube. I am your host, Drew Hare, with my analysts, Chris Adams and Matt Harkleroad. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
I'm Matt.
Back.
We are back, and we are ready to talk the top NFL quarterbacks for 2020. We're going to go through different position groups. Tonight, we're going to start with the quarterbacks, the top quarterbacks for 2020 based on what our analysts' rankings. And then we're going to also talk about running backs and wide receivers in later videos. So we're tonight just going to focus specifically on the quarterbacks. We've been doing this for a number of years, guys. Why don't you go ahead and share with everybody what your methodology is? This isn't just based on any kind of fantasy football rankings. What is your methodology?
Yeah, so we've been doing this for years, and basically the idea is there's 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL, and you've got one of them. You're going to have one of them on your team for a year. Which one do you want, and which guy would you want over the next guy, and so on and so forth. We assume that they're healthy that entire year, but we would consider a guy who is injury prone or has a big question mark about coming back from an injury. Say, like if Alex Smith was a starting quarterback, he would get a huge knock for not knowing what he can actually do on the football field. But if a guy broke his leg, regular broke his leg, he would not be dinged on that from the last season. So.
Now, Chris, who was last year's number one quarterback in your guys' rankings?
Yeah, it was Tom Brady. It was Aaron Rodgers had a nice streak with us for a few years.
Right.
And then it was Peyton Manning there for a little bit. And then last year we were kind of in a tradition phase between, Aaron Rodgers had fallen back a little bit, but we weren't quite ready to go to one of the younger guys yet. So we kind of just went with the GOAT last year as our number one quarterback. So.
Well, what we're going to do here is we're going to start at the top with our new number one quarterback. I'm not going to spoil anything. We'll let these guys share who their top quarterback is. We're going to work our way down from 1 to 32. So who is your number one quarterback for 2020, guys? Matt, want to share it?
No shocker here. It's Mr. Patrick Mahomes, not the MVP last year, but the MVP of the Super Bowl. Only reason he wasn't MVP probably was because Lamar Jackson had an unbelievable season, A, and B, hurt for a couple of games. So the guy can just do more on a football field than everybody else. Besides, maybe if you consider running to be more important than throwing for a quarterback, then Lamar Jackson would be able. You could make the argument that he can do some things that Patrick can't do or doesn't do, but Patrick can throw every ball. He's unbelievably accurate. He fits balls into places that even like the biggest gunslingers in the history of the game, like your Brett Favre's and guys like that, just made it look like it was daring to throw balls into those situations. And Patrick makes it look like it's something that happens daily, hourly, minutely. He can literally do just about. I don't think there's a throw or ball or read the guy doesn't make well.
Yeah. Chris, anything you want to add?
Yeah, just Matt described our methodology before a few minutes ago, but regardless of what methodology you're using, whether you're talking about a fantasy quarterback, whether you're talking about a guy for one season, whether you're talking about a guy to win one game, or whether you're talking about a guy to build your team around for the next 5 years, I think the answer to all of those questions, the number one is going to be Patrick Mahomes. He's at the top of the game right now, and he was very handsomely rewarded for his play.
Very handsomely
this year.
Yeah, no, that would be nice. But you guys don't even have Lamar Jackson from the Baltimore Ravens, the reigning NFL MVP, as your number two quarterback. You guys actually have Russell Wilson. How close is it between Mahomes and Wilson, and then number three, Aaron Rodgers from the Green Bay Packers and Lamar Jackson from the Ravens? How close is that tier? Is it easily like Mahomes is better, on a separate tier from the other three? Is it top two versus the other two? How do you guys usually see those four intermingling?
Yes. So when Matt and I did this ranking, we actually didn't really spend much time debating the top four. It kind of flew through easy. I'll kind of just run through them quickly, and then Matt can add on anything he has to that. Russell Wilson, this is a guy who's been kind of lurking for a while. It's taken Matt a little while to come around to him, but he's a guy. I mean, we were doing this video a couple years ago. I mean, I think it was like maybe 2 or 3 years ago. We said, well, the Seahawks are transitioning from being like a run-first defensive team into Russ's team. We'll see what he's going to do. And he's responded. Guy makes all the throws. If it weren't for Mahomes and Jackson putting up the numbers they did last year, Russell, I mean, his numbers were amazing as well, like touchdown to interception ratio. And he's just so smart on the field. He makes all the right plays, and he does everything you want a franchise quarterback to do. So his time is here. His time is now. Aaron at number 3. This is a guy who had our number 1 spot for a long time. Fell back a little bit 2 years ago. Last year, I thought he had a really, really good year in a new system. Now they switched things up a little bit in Green Bay. They went to a more balanced offense, and I think that helped Rodgers. Wasn't the years. He's not throwing for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns like he used to, but he still had an amazing touchdown to interception ratio. He can still make all of the throws that you need a quarterback to make. He's got an amazing arm. He's mobile. He can do everything, and he can win games when you need him to. So he's maybe not putting up as much of the truly eye-popping numbers as he did a few years ago, but he's still everything you want in an elite quarterback. Lamar at number 4. Some rankings might have him a little higher, maybe him up as 2. One of the things that we kind of do in this ranking is we try not to get swayed too much by recency bias. After we like to see how, after a player has a breakthrough year, we like to see how they respond to that. Last year, there was an argument that could have been made to put Mahomes number 1, coming off of a year where he threw 50 touchdown passes and was the MVP. I think we had him in the 4 spot as well last year because we wanted to see how did he respond to that. Same thing with Lamar. He had a truly fantastic year last season up until the final game in the playoffs, but it was still just an amazing year. But we want to see what he does for an encore. Teams are going to have more of a book on him, you would think. They may try to copy what the Titans did. Then football is all about adjustment. Defenses adjust, so it's going to be interesting to see where he counter adjusts. Maybe next year he elevates up to number 2, but we want to see what he does for an encore this year. And again, we've jumped him up from, I think we had him in the teens somewhere last year, all the way up to 4. So not too shabby.
Matt, anything you want to?
Yeah, just to echo a little bit of what Chris said there. I think the interesting thing about these 4 guys is that if you look back in the history of our rankings and most quarterback rankings over the past 20 years or so, guys who are as mobile as these 4 guys are really, that wasn't a huge part of the game that they need to worry about. But all 4 of these guys can produce running the ball. And when it comes to Lamar, I think, it's just one big season. It's hard to say that that's going to continue. He didn't have a great showing in the playoffs. So I think and if this was a ranking of which guy do you want to build your franchise around, Lamar is going to be up there, maybe even higher than Russell at this point. But 1 year, you have your pick of any quarterback, and 2 guys have picked before you. Are you going to take Rodgers? Or are you going to take Lamar? And in our case, 1 year, we've got a loaded team. We're ready to go for the Super Bowl. I'm going to take a little bit of experience in that case.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's fair. Yeah, I think you guys have a clear top 4, but let's go ahead and go through the rest of the top 10. And then we can discuss and see where we are. And number 5, you guys have Drew Brees from the New Orleans Saints. Number 6, Deshaun Watson from the Houston Texans. Number 7, Kirk Cousins from the Minnesota Vikings. We will be coming back to that. Number 8, Matt Ryan, the Atlanta Falcons. Number 9, Tom Brady from the Tampa Bay Bucks. I had to make sure I write that correctly. It's not New England anymore. It's Tampa Bay. And rounding out the top 10, Carson Wentz at the Philadelphia Eagles. All right. We're going to dedicate 1 minute to talking about Kirk Cousins at number 7. So, Matt, you're on the Cousins train. You have been for a while. How do you feel after he's about 7 or 8 last year in your rankings as well? Do you feel like he kind of stayed the same based on 2019?
Yeah, I mean, arguably, you could make the case that this was his best year coming out. He had a good year the year prior. I think it's a quiet, good. At the beginning of the season, he had some tumultuous minutes there with Stephon Diggs, who they've moved on from. And we'll see with coming back with a little less weaponry what Kirk does. But I mean, if you look at his completion ratio, the amount, what he can do, what he produces, there's always the knock on him that he doesn't win in big moments. He kind of answered some of those questions. I felt like, he won a couple of games, doing big things. The guy is just, he's consistent. He seems to be getting better still at this point of his career, which is what he should be doing at this age. There's not a whole lot of knocks you can make. I mean, so the big one has been that he just doesn't win the big games, but I think he's kind of changing that, that little knock that he's got on him and kind of counteracting that a little bit. And then, yeah, I mean, you just look around. Would you rather have a Matt Ryan? I'm sure there's lots of people out there that would rather take a Matt Ryan, but his best years seem to be behind him maybe. So it's kind of interesting. This group is kind of an interesting group. The only guy out there, if you look at Deshaun Watson, I think the sky's the limit for a guy like him. He seems to be getting better. If he can stay healthy, then there's really, he can do so much. Just that playoff game was just unbelievable. The best player on the field, winning games on his own. This is an interesting pack, I think, between 5 and 10, and you can make a lot of arguments one way or the other, but I'll stick with my boy Kirk for a little longer.
And I just want to piggyback up.
Yeah,
I think with Kirk Cousins is maybe more than anyone in this rankings, it's the rules of the game. Like, am I taking Kirk Cousins to lead my fantasy team? No. Am I taking Kirk Cousins to win one game in the Super Bowl? No. Am I taking Kirk Cousins to build my team around? No. But if you're looking at one guy on a strong team for one full season, you can do a lot worse than Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I think quiet consistency for the most part. Obviously, I think Deshaun Watson has a little bit of a higher ceiling overall versus Breeze, Cousins, Ryan. I'm just saying more like that group 5 to 10.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's quiet consistency outside of what Watson's able to do. I think Watson can take his game to another level versus what I think Breeze and Cousins and Ryan and even Brady at this point can do, especially Brady with those weapons now. I think it's pretty solid.
Big drop for Brady from us. Just a bad season all around. Bad, but not what Brady's used to. Didn't have a whole lot of help in New England, hence why they blew up the whole team. I think you can look at that and say, all right, is that an anomaly, or has Father Time finally caught up to Brady? We won't know until he gets with this giant group of weapons he's assembled in Tampa Bay. Yeah. But he's the GOAT, and it's hard to knock him too much and take any faith out of him. He still looks like he's in pretty good shape. But again, was last year an anomaly, or was it the new normal? And that'll be telling. I think Chris said he was number 1 for us last year. It's a pretty big drop. But you look in the guys around him at this point. We have Carson Wentz 2 spots below him, Kirk Cousins in that same area. Right now, if you had to pick one season, maybe you take a Kirk Cousins over a Tom Brady. And we're not talking about a Super Bowl victory, but getting a team there, winning games in the regular season too. That's kind of an interesting place for the GOAT to end up. But I think at this point, there's almost nowhere you can't. It's hard to put him any higher after last season.
And I would say too, kind of with that, switching to another guy. Kind of a theme for last year quarterbacking is a lot of the older quarterbacks who have been mainstays on this and other lists for years in the top finally started showing their age. Guys like Roethlisberger and Rivers and most of all Brady, they're down a lot lower than we've had them in the past. The one kind of senior citizen who's still hanging on, maybe a last hurrah, is Drew Brees in the 5 spot. Suffered that injury last year and missed a lot, but came back and was pretty much back to his old self. Now, didn't play very well in the playoff game, so that could be, was that an anomaly, or was that a sign of things to come from him? We'll find out. But, Brees is just another guy who still it continues to put up great numbers. And right now we have him at 5, which I think is fitting for what he can bring you. He still completes passes at a ridiculously high rate. And we'll see this year, is he Is this the final last hurrah for Drew Brees, or does he manage to stick around at this high level for another year or so?
Yeah, especially when they have Jameis backing him up. I mean, obviously Jameis comes with his own kinds of flaws, but he still almost threw 5,000 yards last year in that Bucs offense, and he was still really good. And it seems like, we'll see what the future holds for Breeze and the rest of that Saints offense. Let's go ahead and continue on. I want to get to talk about some of these next group of quarterbacks, and then we can talk about some of the groupings and see who might have been in the top 10, who's just on the outside, might be breaking in next year. Number 11, you guys have Jimmy Garoppolo from the San Francisco 49ers. At 12, the Dak Prescott from the Dallas Cowboys. Number 13, Matthew Stafford from the Detroit Lions. Number 14, Phillip Rivers from the now Indianapolis Colts. And Ben Roethlisberger for the Pittsburgh Steelers at 15. Garoppolo, Prescott, Carson Wentz in that 10 to 12 range. Seems like you guys might have had them interchangeable. Why did you guys go with Wentz over the other two?
Yeah, so
Well,
we went back.
I was going to say, this is the biggest argument we had going through this rankings, and I think I deferred to Chris on this one. I'm not, and I think Chris and I are both on the same page where we feel like Dak has still something to prove, and he's still not there. Jimmy's hard to get a read on because, there's not a whole lot of experience on that list for him. But he had some, great games last year. He was good in the playoffs, decent in the Super Bowl. It's hard to knock a guy that takes his team that far. And then, Carson Wentz at times, looks like an MVP on the field, has some ups and downs, didn't have a whole lot of weaponry. Chris has him higher than I do. I think I would take Jimmy over Carson, but again, we have to flip coins sometimes to make this list work out when you use two people to do it. And again, Dak, there's plenty of people that will argue, and I'm sure there's lots of Cowboy fans out there that would argue to put him higher. I'm sure there's some out there that would argue to put him lower, but I still think he's got a lot to prove.
Yeah, Matt, I agree with a lot of that. When we went really back and forth with like Jimmy and Dak, right? On the one hand, you've got Dak, who puts up big time numbers with a lot of talent around him, but puts up big time numbers, but really hasn't won much since his rookie year. And then you've got Jimmy, who's maybe kind of the polar opposite of that, doesn't put up the big numbers, isn't asked to do as much, but just wins. He broke in as a starter, won like 6 games in a row on the Niners, and then was injured, missed a whole year. They went 2-14, and then he's back last year, and they're in the Super Bowl. Like, that's more than a game manager, right? Like, he doesn't put up the big numbers, but he makes plays when he needs to, and he had some very good statistical games last year. And then why I ultimately lean towards putting Carson ahead of both of them is just we've seen Wentz play at an MVP level. Now, it's been a couple years, and he's battled some injuries. But again, like Matt was saying, we do assume health, although he is getting perilously close to being described as injury prone. But we have seen him play at an MVP level more than I think of the other guys. At their best, I think I would take Wentz over any of them. I think he's got the most physical tools. He's got the best arm. He's the most mobile of the three. So kind of when you're in that kind of flip a coin range, I'm tending to go with who's got the best tools.
Yeah, and then you've got your pack of old guys that Chris kind of alluded to. It's hard to even put Ben Roethlisberger on a list at this point after sitting out for a whole season at his age. A 24-year-old that sits out for a season, you could pretty much assume you're going to get the same guy back, assuming it wasn't like a catastrophic knee injury like with Teddy Bridgewater or something. But at his advanced age, it's funny to say that for football for a guy who's not even flirting with 40. But that's the way it is football, and it's hard to guarantee that he's going to be back. Phillip Rivers, decent season last year, not his best for sure. I'm sure they were a little disappointed. Obviously, that's why they moved on with what their season ended up and Rivers' performance. But I think with the right weapons, having Marlon Mack there, a couple of weapons at wide receiver, that they're probably he's in a better situation than he was maybe in San Diego. But unfortunately for him, no Keenan Allen to pick up a lot of those balls catch some balls that shouldn't be caught or couldn't be caught by many other people. But it'll be interesting to see in those group, I think. But Ben, you kind of just like throw a dart at the board at this point.
Yeah, and this next group from 16 to 20 has a combination of, some older guys, some older veterans been around for a while, and then some young guns. So let's go ahead and get to them. So at 16, you have Jared Goff from the Los Angeles Rams. At 17, Ryan Tannehill from the Tennessee Titans. At 18, Derek Carr from the Las Vegas Raiders. Number 19, Kyler Murray from the Arizona Cardinals. And number 20, Baker Mayfield from the Cleveland Browns. Now, as we continue to move on, you guys have one or two names. Obviously, I know we talked about Carson and Jimmy and Dak at that 10, 11, 12, interchangeably to see who might be in the top 10. Are there any of those names maybe from, Stafford down into Mayfield that might be jumping up into, when we talk next year for 2021, who's going to be in that top 10? Is it easily going to be Kyler? Is it going to be Goff? Maybe Ben pops back up if he has a good season? What do you guys think?
Yeah, if you're going to give me one name, I'm probably going to take Kyler Murray just because I think, it's hard to rate a rookie's season. Second name I'd throw out would be Baker Mayfield. I just think he had a really bad season with a lot of craziness going on in Cleveland. Hopefully those things have, as a Browns fan, hopefully those things are cleared up. He looks to be in the best shape I've seen him coming at it, in camp. He's still got so many weapons. He only gathered more weapons in the offseason somehow by adding Austin Hooper. There's just so many. I don't know. I think those are the two names you look at. And, with Goff, Goff could be in the top 10 next year, or he could be in the bottom 20. Like, the guy is a one step forward, two steps back kind of player. It seems like you're in love with him one season, and then you want to maybe next year's a trial season to see if you move away from him in the next season. And it seems like it's always that, almost game to game with the guy where, you remember that shootout they had with Kansas City a couple of years ago, and a guy looked like just as good as Patrick Mahomes out there, but he's not in that realm now. Those are the two I'd go with, Kyler and Baker, and my 19-20 guy, which is interesting because that's hopefully one or two of those guys will make a big jump next year.
Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I'm tempted to go with Baker Mayfield as well. I don't want to sound like a homer, but I agree with what Matt said. He had a really rough year last year, and just a lot of craziness. It's a year removed from breaking a rookie touchdown record. The talent is there. Like, he didn't forget how to play football. Also, watching a lot of Browns games last year, and as bad as a year as he had last year, and if he did have a bad year, at no point, none of the Browns' 10 losses did I look at it and say, they lost this game because of Baker Mayfield. He didn't play well, but, there wasn't a scenario where, like, the defense was shutting a team, forcing 5 turnovers and giving up 10 points, and Baker is throwing 4 interceptions, right? Or, great coaching. He was short-circuiting great coaching. So there was just so many things going on last year. So I think Baker would be my bet to move up, whether it's into the top 10 as a Browns fan, hopefully even higher. I don't know, if he's going to make the quantum leap up to the top, just because the Browns, I think, are going to be a more run-oriented team this year. But yeah, he'd be my guy to be moving up from 20 next year.
Sounds good. I think those are obviously, when we're comparing some of the older guys in that 13, 14, 15 range, it just makes sense that those two young guys in their second and third years, respectively, would be the most likely ones to jump back up. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to go through the rest of the list, 21 to 32, and see if there's any kind of outstanding, quick takes on any of these outstanding quarterbacks, whether you guys have something specifically profound or just something that has jumped out to you. 21, we have Teddy Bridgewater from the now Carolina Panthers. At 22, we have Cam Newton, the potential starting quarterback for the New England Patriots. Number 23, Josh Allen from the Buffalo Bills. 24, Sam Darnold from the New York Jets. 25, Mitchell Trubisky from the Chicago Bears. 26, Daniel Jones from the New York Giants. 27, Ryan Fitzpatrick from the Miami Dolphins. 28, Dwayne Haskins from the Washington Football Team. 29, Gardner Minshew from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Number 30, Drew Lock from the Denver Broncos. Number 31, Tyrod Taylor from the Los Angeles Chargers. And number 32, we usually don't rank rookies, but since literally Cincinnati has no other starting caliber quarterbacks at this point, it's going to be Joe Burrow. We know that. And without any kind of information for him, Joe Burrow will pop up at 32. He might be better than some of these quarterbacks. We don't know. But, I rattled off a laundry list of names. There's some very interesting ones, not so interesting ones as well. Matt, is there one quarterback that you wanted to talk about? Whether you just think it's somebody who's just ranked too low or, what else?
Firstly, I will say I know Joe Burrow is better than some. But with our methodology, we've never ranked rookies higher than, if there's a rookie in there, if there's 3 rookies that are starting, we know we're going to start them. We put them in order we think, but otherwise they get slotted in at the bottom and have to work their way up, earn their stripes, so to speak, just like rookies do in the NFL, right? So, I think if you talk about that whole group, maybe Josh Allen's the one guy out of that entire bottom 12 guys where you look at a team and they say they're happy with that guy. And there's not a huge set of questions for that team around. I know we didn't put him at 21 because I think there's still a lot of question marks around him. But if you're the Giants, are you super pumped about your quarterback? Drew Lock, who knows what's going to happen in Denver? Like, you look at these ones and you're like, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. Maybe Allen's the one guy out of that entire group where you're like, I can see a pathway for him to be a good quarterback in the NFL. Maybe Sam Darnold's in that same boat. Young guy had, the mono thing happen last year. It's hard to say for sure, but you'll just look at it and you're like, man, if I'm any of those bottom 12 teams, I'm not real happy with my quarterback situation, except for obviously Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. They're probably pretty stoked. Of the guys who have any film in the NFL, Allen maybe looks like the one guy out of this group that could jump into the top, in my opinion. Not
Chris,
top,
how about you, buddy?
but out of the bottom 20 or bottom 12.
Right.
I'm going to say Sam Darnold. So if you look at that ballyhooed class of 2018, right? Baker Mayfield sets a rookie touchdown record. Lamar Jackson is an MVP in his second year. Josh Allen takes his team to the playoffs in his second year. And then on the other end, Josh Rosen looking like a bust. Darnold is the guy there who has just been sort of the quiet guy in that mix. Had a pretty good year in his rookie year, and a season that maybe 10 years ago would have been seen as a really, really good rookie year. Showed some promise, made some plays, and then last year gets hit with mono, which is so random. And then the Jets were kind of a mess. They're still kind of a mess. There's questions about whether what the coaching situation is there. Is Gase the right guy? He still really has no weapons. He's got an old Le'Veon Bell and really nothing in the receiver world. So the deck is kind of stacked against him. But on the other hand, I think he's got talent. He's got ability. He's still super young. He was really young when he came into the league. And I think, if they can develop some kind of consistency there in New York, he could be a guy who's moving up into maybe not top 10, but maybe into the mid-teens next year. And again, I also would say that if you're the Jets, you're not worried about your quarterback situation.
Yep, I agree. Just got to keep them upright and potentially, right.
Well, especially that's the bigger question to me. If I'm Buffalo, I feel like Josh Allen did enough to make me really like the guy last year. He's not maybe your traditional quarterback, but the guy's a gamer. And sometimes that's what you want. And like I said, the rest of the guys, God, it's just, what are you going to do with Cam Newton? What are you going to do with Teddy Bridgewater? Teddy Bridgewater looked good at times, but at other times, he's such a question mark around him, just health-wise, and can he stand up to an entire season? If you're the Buffalo Bills, you're probably not thinking you're moving on at this point. And like I said, the Jets aren't moving on at this point either. But I think they're both probably a little nervous.
Yeah. Well, I think I heard a quote about Josh Allen, and I think this is perfect. It's the good news is that there's nothing on the football field that Josh Allen can't do. The bad news is there's nothing on the field that Josh Allen won't do.
Fair. Very
I agree. Any final thoughts as we wrap up the quarterback review and the rankings? I mean, I think this quarterbacks is about as deep as it's ever been in the NFL. I mean, some very interesting guys. I mean, when you put former MVPs like Cam Newton down at 22 at this point, potentially walking into Tom Brady's old role in the Patriots, I mean, anytime you put him down at, in the bottom third of these quarterbacks, all the way up to some really interesting guys and the top 10, top 15, any kind of overarching thoughts you guys might have about how quarterback play looks in the year 2020?
Yeah, I think it's pretty strong. You've got a lot of guys, a lot of teams who are happy with their quarterback situation. I think through like 22, 23, you either have, a great quarterback, a good quarterback, or a young quarterback teams that who can be teams that can be excited about for one reason or another. The bottom, not as much, taking out the Bengals with Joe Burrow. But you have, potentially, I know this is going to be a weird year with, it's going to be a college football season with half the teams not playing. But you got two potential other future players, stars in Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, and undoubtedly some other ones. So, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are in full-on tank for Trevor mode. But some of those other teams near the bottom could also be in that mix as well. And then you also got, I guess they haven't made official announcements about QBs in LA and Miami or Chicago even. So we did our best guessing. But, you could see Tua or Justin Herbert in there, although Tua probably is kind of a reach to start week one coming off that injury, and Fitzpatrick played decently last year. But Nick Foles coming off the bench for Chicago. So there's some young folks there. And I wouldn't be surprised, though, that if we see Justin Herbert and Tua by the end of the year. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, I think for a final thought for me, I think, it's kind of like, rankings are rankings, but I think the interesting thing is like seeing trends and noticing things that are changing. And you just look at the top of this list, and, one thing that jumps out is that maybe for the, definitely for the first time in the NFL, after the long legacy of racial discrimination at the quarterback position, that you notice that the guys that finally got chances in college and high school because of that, discriminatory nature of picking quarterbacks, in the NFL, and like I said, the whole way down through Pop Warner football, has maybe that legacy is starting to wash out, because you start to see that, you've got out of our top 5 guys, 4 of those guys are black. And, that's, I think that's a huge moment in the NFL, especially in the current climate that we have going on around Black Lives Matter and everything else, that, the NFL always seems to be lagging behind the rest of the country when it comes to certain things. But at this one, they seem to be in the right place at the right time. And hopefully they can use that power to kind of, and those big faces and names, to help situations on the field and off. So I think that's a big thing to go forward with, and a bright, shining hope for the future for the NFL.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well said. Well put.
The NBA is the players are doing great things in the field of social justice right now, and movements for equality, and hopefully the NFL will be able to follow suit this fall.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right. I think that sums up where we stand for the quarterbacks for 2020. Look for our other videos on running backs and wide receivers coming soon on our channel. Make sure to follow us at Hark-Adams Sports on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube. For Chris Adams from Harkleroad, I'm Drew Hare. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.